In the name of the Most High God, the beneficent, the merciful, I speak. Rasul.
And do.
Today we will have a history lesson. History is our most important attribute. Once we forget our history, then we have to strive to try to find out what it is again. I chose this lesson because we've gotten away from this person somewhat. We call on her. We call on her. There were many things attributed to her. She was given the title, the most beautiful woman ever. They say Nefertiti was a beautiful woman, but this woman had a beauty unsurpassed to any of them. This woman, this goddess, was none other than the Greeks called Hathor. We call her Mother Earth, Merhati, Bisim Leuli Mihiru Amun-Ra. The history of Hathor, or Merhati. As I said, many things have been attributed to her. These are just a few of the things that were attributed to her. These were things attributed to her inventions, so to speak. She was a great inventress of ancient days. Hathor, or Merhati, was a Hamite called an African from the Roman ruler Africanus. He nicknamed our ancestors as being Africans, Negroes, Nigers, boys, Annies, Negress, Negritos, Negroid. Let us run these words down to their lowest terms. Now these names are all Latin names or Latin terms. Negress, a Negro woman or girl. Negri, Negritos. These blacks of the Hamite race are now members of a certain dwarfish people of Southeast Asia and of Africa, especially of the Philippine Islands and East India. Negro is a person belonging to any of the black race of Africa, a colored person having some black ancestors, adjective, or pertaining to Negroes. The word is Low Spanish, meaning Negra, or black. Negroid, resembling Negroes, and akin to Negro race, of a Negro type, and called a Negroid race. Now let history change this spoliation. Now we're going into the facts of our past. The word history means his story. Whoever writes such records of a people, the history of civilization, means the story of a race's achievements. We will begin with Merhati, nicknamed Hathor by the European nations, yet the name means mind and memory. Merhati, mind and memory. She was the inventress of the loom, the plow, the mill, the bridle, the yoke, the rope, the drum, the trumpet, the flag pole, and dance. She was the first cultivator of the olive, the fig, the apple, and the flowers. In time, the idea of the use of fiber slowly developed. Flax and afterwards cotton was grown. Wool was gathered from pleating, twisting, spinning, and weaving were developed. The use of linen was introduced, also that of rope, and the 6 great inventions, the loom was made. But as Egypt was a warm climate, where clothing was considered more of a convenience than a necessity, the full value of the loom was scarcely appreciated by them and developed very slowly. The loom was invented by Hathor, a young girl of Tepahit, a village in the 22nd nome of Upper Egypt, about 35 miles from Onion Town. This place afterwards became known during the Greek age as Aphroditopolis, in honor of her. Hathor gathered some flax, which grew wild in Egypt at this time. What did she do? She soaked the stems in water and separated the fiber from the stalk. This fiber she bleached in the sun and twisted with great care into a thread, which she would upon a stick or a spool. That is, she twisted it and she put it on a thread or a spool. She then fastened a large number of these threads between 2 sticks, some 2 feet apart, making a warp, and passed another thread alternately over and under these warp threads for the roof, and thus wove or pleated a half yard of linen. She ties around her waist in a tasteful manner and wore it to the Onion Town festivals. It was called the girdle of Hathor. Let us stop right there. We are finding out that she was the first one to introduce clothes. We see symbolically people are still using that symbolism today, but they're calling it by a different name. They are calling it an apron. Our Mason brothers wear their apron, so to speak, which is something like a loincloth. This was the first woven garment ever worn by anyone. Your history. When the primitive or simple living Kemites came into the Nile Valley, they wore no clothing whatever and probably needed none. In the course of time, as they shed their hair, That's another indicator that these people had hair on their body. Even though they were in the torrid zone, they had hair on their bodies. Maybe not to the extent of what some of our ancestors or people who lived in colder climates had, to the extent of hair on their bodies. In the course of time, as they shed their hair, a skin was sometimes thrown around the shoulders in chilly weather, and the men began to wear the G-string. After the loom was invented, the leading ladies who had heretofore worn only a modest look or some golden ornaments and a sad, sweet smile, following the Hathor style, now began to wear the girdle when they went in public. So she started a craze. Before then, people wore nothing at all. It kind of reminds me of the story of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve was in the garden, and they were naked. But after they ate the apple, they were aware of their nakedness. Therefore, they had to be clothed from after that time. In after years, the poet claimed that it possessed a magical charm and contained the arts of persuasion, yearning, and longing. When Hathor, Mertati, was deified as the goddess of love and beauty, these attributes of her girdle were personified as the three graces which follow in her train, and they were named joy, bloom, and brilliance. The three combined were also personified as Cupid, that little man that you see at Valentine's Day, is a personification again of Hathor, the little naked man with the arrow, shooting its arrow as a symbol of love. The first strand of threads became the thread of life, which was in charge of the three faiths. The use of the girdle as a religious symbol is retained. It is used on state occasions by kings, nobles, and priests. Soon, the leading men began also to wear this girdle, which consisted of a half-yard linen strip tied around them, called by the people of the present day a loincloth. Owing to their crude method of manufactures, this girdle, when roughly made, cost about as much in labor as a cheap suit of clothes of the present day, $10. But when woven with great care, it equaled the best modern linen and cost labor about $51, so to speak. As wealth accumulated, so did the pride of this ornament. A history of your achievements now. Several generations later, the loom was enlarged, and those who could afford it now wore a yard of breeches or pants. That was a media idea of a latter day. The Kemites sometimes wore skins as mantles in winter, and with this enlarged and improved loin made linen sheets or mantles, which they wrapped around themselves, and in the course of time began to add under and outer garments to the first dress. The festive attire of one age became the everyday dress of another. The Hathor loom, as enlarged a second time, is now in use among the Navajo Indians of northern Arizona. The idea has reached St. Louis and is used in the public schools to weave beads. When the skirt reached the ankles, they began to wear sandals, then slippers, and finally shoes and boots of leather. Can we not see the beginning of the fashion industry? And you started it all. All of this was attributed to Merhati, Mother Earth, by one of the names that she was called. Fishermen, farm laborers, and mechanics went barefooted and wore the loincloth or G-string only. From this single girdle, through the use of the loom, all kinds of woven materials have gradually developed. Not to swallow sleep. In one direction, all kinds of clothing worn on the person. In another, sheets, bedding, table linen, curtains, and draperies of all kinds. Hathor, Merhati, is universally accredited with creating the arts of spinning and weaving. She undoubtedly invented the spindle and distaff and made the first piece of woven goods. In modern times, the use of steam and the improvements in the loom have added immensely to the use of the woven goods, so that the annual output seems incredible. From that idea, all kinds of things have been developed from that idea, from that original idea, up to the invention of the fly shuttle. In 1738, spinning and weaving were nearly as simple as in ancient times. Then came the spinning jenny and Cartwright's power looms, 1785, which is regarded as the beginning of the English factory system, which has revolutionized the industry system of the modern world. And as the Rasul says, peace be upon him, there is nothing new under the sun. What they are calling modern is none other than a rebirth of the old. Fahami above all, salam,
Salam.
produced by your adept minister in Islam, delivered originally by Priestess Balkis Makida. Bisalam yastarak penni. Peace be with you.
Peace be with you.
Salam.